In this video I will tell you a little bit about GemRush 2nd edition. I do not have the box to show you because I'm traveling these days for Thanksgiving break and I brought the game with me, and the game does make a good travel game as long as you bag the components and you put them, usually like what I do, in the box of a bigger board game that has some room in it. GemRush, I played and reviewed the 1st edition about a year ago in the early 2018. You can watch my video for that game to get a general sense. Here we'll still cover gameplay in general, but I will also point out some of the differences between the 1st and the 2nd edition. This definitely is not just a reprint, it does not just have upgraded art, but it also has some new rules and new elements. In this game we will be building a mine by building new rooms, and this is the main way in which you will score points. The rooms have different requirements or different sets of gems that you need to provide and discard to be able to build a room on the other edge and to be able to score the points associated with it. Also, each room has a different effect, and there is an iconography. You kind of have to learn how to read these symbols, what it means to look at a number of cards and take a number of cards or other things. The iconography is a little cryptic at the beginning, it makes sense after a while, but fear not. In any case, there is a full description of each room's effect in the rulebook, although that means that the first game or two somebody will be flipping through the book and say, okay, what does the Soulstone Shaft do? Tunnels, we also had tunnels, a new addition of the new edition. Now, let me show you how it works. At the beginning of the game, each player takes a dwarf and they will lead their dwarfs again through the mine, trying to collect as many points as possible. You have a hand of cards. These cards represent different gems. Each card represents 2 gems with the exception of Diamond Dust. There's only Diamond Dust on the Diamond Dust card, but that is a wild gem. So they represent 2 different types of gems or stones, and when you play a card to build a new room, you can play it for one or for both. So for example, this would meet the requirement of an Electrum or of a Soulstone, or an Electrum and Soulstone. So you have your hand of fancy cards, and then to start the game you draw a random room and you place your dwarfs on it. Now, during the game, you can first move up to 3 spaces, and actually, interesting enough, building new rooms is part of movement. That is, if you want to move across an open edge, an unbuilt edge, you simply need to discard the corresponding number and type of stones. For example, if I have a stone of that kind, I can say, okay, I have that in my hand. I discard it and I build a room there. I also get to score the corresponding number of points, which in this case is only 1. Also, in this game, to keep track of points, we have these really nice, really fancy diamonds that come in their own little bag that you can use to store. So when you build a room, you will draw a card from the room deck, and you will simply place the new room next to it. In this case, well, there wasn't much of a choice there. In other cases, you can choose the orientation like I would be able to if I was placing a card here. When you move, simply to move to again, you can build and as part of movement, and then you move in the room that you just built and you spend a movement point. But then remember, you can keep moving. In fact, you can even build multiple rooms in a single turn if you are able to reach enough open edges and if you have the right resources. Also, sometimes you have a situation such as this one in which you have an open edge on one side and a closed edge on the other. These count as one-way passages. It is possible, in fact, to move from one tile to the other, but only going from the direction of the open passage. to the other one. I think of them as very steep passages. That's why you can go down in one direction but not in the other. So you move across the mine, sometimes because you want to reach a specific edge that you want to build, some other times because you want to reach a room and maybe you want to use its ability. Now, as I showed you earlier, there's a new type of card here, which is the tunnel. When you build across an open edge and you draw a tunnel, simply you place the tunnel there, and then you keep building, you keep going. Think of the tunnel as a teleporting device. It simply is not there, doesn't count as a space for movement purposes. So you move. Sometimes there are actions in the rooms that you can use as you're moving. For example, let me give you extra movement points. But then there are also actions that you can then use in the main action phase. After you have moved and potentially built, you take your own action phase in which you can either draw a new card or hopefully use the ability of the room you're in. Most abilities will allow you to draw more than one card or to decide the kind of card that you will end up drawing, because really this is the engine of the game. You're trying to get as many cards as possible to create the correct sets to be able to build rooms and score points. This is the general idea. Use the ability of the room if possible. Drawing a card is pretty much the plan B, the last resort during your action phase. The game can be played cooperatively or competitive. If you play competitive, then simply you agree on a number of victory points. First player to get there wins the game. If you play cooperatively, you still agree on a number of victory points that the group together must achieve at the end of each player's turn. Then you burn 3 cards. So these are not discarded, but they're taken from the deck and removed from the game. That means the game, the deck will become thinner and thinner. At the end, sooner or later, it will get exhausted. If you're able to score the agreed on number of victory points before the deck runs out, you win the game. Before the deck is completely burnt, you win the game. These are things that you have in the first edition and in this one too. As for new things, now we have the skills. I haven't checked, I don't remember them from the previous edition. And you can give them to your dwarves and they will give them unique points, different personalities, but of course also different functionality in the game. Then we have the tunnels, we said that's a difference, and then we simply have different types of stones that we did not have before. We have, for example, first here you have a combination between diamond dust and another stone, and this is a new type of stone that is the warp stone. The warp stone allows you to teleport. It allows you to build through an edge that you're not necessarily adjacent to. Suppose that I'm there and I want to build through that edge, and I have the right cards, and also I have the warp stone. Then I could do it. For example, to build that edge there, I need these two gems that are in this one card, but I also discard the warp stone, so I teleport here, I build the room, and then I move across the edge. So the warp stone is very good because in the first edition it could happen later in the game that you have the large map and you're kind of stuck in the middle of it and you would spend a turn or two just moving to an open edge. Or maybe there was an open edge here and an open edge really far, so after you build that one you had to move to the other thing. That was one of the few weak points of the original edition, which has now been corrected thanks to the warp stone. Then we also have the Eco Glass, which pretty much copies another stone that you play together with it, but it's not fully a wild because you need to have another one. You can't use it to replace a stone that you don't have. If I'm playing this combination of cards here, I can count it as if I have 2 of these, or 2 of these, or 2 of these, plus of course everything else. And finally we have the Orichalcum. The Orichalcum is an attractive stone here, and it is not used to build rooms. It is never among the required stones to build rooms, but if you build a room and you use an Orichalcum, then you score an extra victory point. And this is how GemRush 2nd edition works. I definitely enjoyed the first edition of GemRush, and the 2nd edition is not just a reprint with enhanced art. It is pretty different. It place. Well, you see that the general, of course, the general idea is still there, but with the new stones that you have, then it really, I think, enriches gameplay. It also makes it a little teeny tiny bit more complex because there's simply more game effects that you have to teach to players when you're teaching the game. And at the beginning, the game, although it's so simple, can be a little disoriented if there's anything. If nothing else, because of the many rooms, each working differently, that players have to become familiar with. And so you have players that will try to decode the different icons while somebody else is flipping through the pages and reading the description. The first game will just be slow precisely because players are becoming familiar with the chronology and also with the rules. But then the game itself is really a lot of fun. It is definitely very enjoyable, and I like now how different abilities have increased the player's ability to move around. There was one thing that in the first edition sometimes was less than optimal, less than desirable, was the fact that from time to time you'll find yourself in an area where you towards the edge of the board where you can't build anything and the things that you want to build are really far, or simply you are in the middle of the board and there is nothing that is really close, and so you're spending some turns just moving, not doing anything else, and that always feels a little anticlimactic. That is never all that fun. As opposed to someone else, I'm gonna move there, build a room, use that thing, etc, etc, etc. So it's better. Moving around means more opportunities to be able to do things, to do interesting things, and the perfunctory element of movement is de-emphasized as opposed to the first edition. The new gems are fun. If nothing else, actually, also, I find that the new gems make it a little more challenging to build things. Maybe it's just my impression, but now with many cards that the original edition, each card has 2 stones. And now we have a stone and an orichalcum. That's kind of the point, by the way. The orichalcum is quote-unquote useless, but gives you extra points. But it also means that card has less flexibility. The card that mirrors another card that you have, well, you need to have that one. So these new gems really make the game a little more interesting because they give you different ranges of things that you can do, different combinations that you can create, but at the same time they also make it more challenging. So to me, that's part of the fun. The challenge is higher, but you also have better resources. You just more flexibility as about how you get there. It remains a game that once you're past the little bit moment of confusion of learning what the rooms do, it is still a game that is very simple, very linear, that I can play with my 8-year-old daughter. The 6-year-old probably not so much, but definitely it is a simple, light, enjoyable game. I played it again with my 8-year-old daughter. I played it also with my adult group, and people really liked it. It's more than a filler. It feels a little bit like a filler, but at the same time it lasts longer, but it doesn't feel like it outstays its welcome. Definitely, although we started playing, oh look, I have this filler here, and then quite a bit of time later we were still playing, longer than I expected, or longer than the players expected. We were having a good time. Nobody complained, oh, this game is lasting too long. Because you always have a chance of doing something with your cards, if nothing else, or manipulating your cards. You are thinking what kind of combinations you can form. I never played it at higher number of players. I think the most I played it with was 4 or 5 maybe. It can go higher than that. With 4 or 5, we didn't have any problem with downtime. And nothing else, because even between turns, when somebody else is playing, I'm studying the map. New rooms arrive, then I'm thinking about how I can use them. So downtime didn't seem to be a problem, especially because the game gives you things to think about when it's on your turn. But I don't know that at a higher number of players that will still be true, or if that will become a problem. In general, however, GemRush 2nd edition is really fun. If you have neither of the games, then definitely get this edition here, because simply it is richer than the previous edition. If you're the previous one, are the new things enough to command the purchase of the second edition? I don't know. I'm glad I have both, but I'll leave it to you to decide, because it's different, but not so radically different that you're really getting a new game. On the other hand, if you have both editions, it may happen, like we did one game night, that we had two games going on at the same time. First, I taught the first edition, which really feels like the basic game now, to a group, and then actually to both groups, and then as that group started, I taught the extra things to the other group, and so we had about 9 or 10 players playing GemRush at the same time. In any case, either way, GemRush second edition is definitely a nice upgrade from the previous edition, and definitely it is as fun as the previous edition. I should say it has all the good things of the previous edition, and with a little bit of added complexity. It also comes, however, with considerable more engaging gameplay.